Immigration is the process of moving to a new country or region with the intention of staying and living there. People may choose to immigrate for a variety of reasons, such as employment opportunities, to escape a violent conflict, environmental factors, educational purposes, or to reunite with family. The process of immigrating to the United States can be complicated and is often driven by a few key principles, including uniting families, boosting the economy with skilled professionals, promoting diversity, and helping refugees. Immigration is the international movement of people to a destination country of which they are not usual residents or where they do not possess nationality in order to settle as permanent residents. Commuters, tourists, and other short-term stays in a destination country do not fall under the definition of immigration or migration. Seasonal labor immigration is sometimes included, however. As for economic effects, research suggests that migration is beneficial both to the receiving and sending countries. Research, with few exceptions, finds that immigration on average has positive economic effects on the native population, but is mixed as to whether low-skilled immigration adversely affects underprivileged natives. Studies show that the elimination of barriers to migration would have profound effects on world GDP, with estimates of gains ranging between 67 and 147% for the scenarios in which 37 to 53% of the developing countries' workers migrate to the developed countries. Development economists argue that reducing barriers to labor mobility between developing countries and developed countries would be one of the most efficient tools of poverty reduction. Positive net immigration can soften the demographic dilemma in the aging global north. The academic literature provides mixed findings for the relationship between immigration and crime worldwide, but finds for the United States that immigration either has no impact on the crime rate or that it reduces the crime rate. Research shows that country of origin matters for speed and depth of immigrant assimilation, but that there is considerable assimilation overall for both first and second generation immigrants. Research has found extensive evidence of discrimination against foreign-born and minority populations in criminal justice, business, the economy, housing, healthcare, media, and politics in the United States and Europe. The term immigration was coined in the 17th century, referring to non-warlike population movements between the emerging nation-states. When people cross national borders during their migration, they are called migrants or immigrants, from Latin, migrer, wanderer, from the perspective of the destination country. In contrast, from the perspective of the country from which they leave, they are called emigrants or outmigrants. Human migration is the movement by people from one place to another, particularly different countries, with the intention of settling temporarily or permanently in the new location. It typically involves movements over long distances and from one country or region to another. The number of people involved in every wave of immigration differs depending on the specific circumstances. Historically, early human migration includes the peopling of the world, i.e. migration to world regions where there was previously no human habitation, during the Upper Paleolithic. Since the Neolithic, most migrations, except for the peopling of remote regions such as the Arctic or the Pacific, were predominantly warlike, consisting of conquest or landnam on the part of expanding populations. Colonialism involves expansion of sedentary populations into previously only sparsely settled territories or territories with no permanent settlements. In the modern period, human migration has primarily taken the form of migration within and between existing sovereign states, either controlled, legal immigration, or uncontrolled and in violation of immigration laws, illegal immigration. Migration can be voluntary or involuntary. Involuntary migration includes forced displacement, in various forms such as deportation, the slave trade, flight, war refugees and ethnic cleansing, all of which could result in the creation of diasporas. As of 2015, the number of international migrants has reached 244 million worldwide, which reflects a 41% increase since 2000. The largest number of international migrants live in the United States, with 19% of the world's total. One-third of the world's international migrants are living in just 20 countries. Germany and Russia host 12 million migrants each, taking the second and third place in countries with the most migrants worldwide. Saudi Arabia hosts 10 million migrants, followed by the United Kingdom, 9 million, and the United Arab Emirates, 8 million. In most parts of the world, migration occurs between countries that are located within the same major area. Between 2000 and 2015, Asia added more international migrants than any other major area in the world, gaining 26 million. Europe added the second largest with about 20 million. In 2015, the number of international migrants below the age of 20 reached 37 million, while 177 million are between the ages of 20 and 64. International migrants living in Africa were the youngest, with a median age of 29, followed by Asia, 35 years, and Latin America/Caribbean, 36 years, while migrants were older in Northern America, 42 years, Europe, 43 years, and Oceania, 44 years. Nearly half, 43%, of all international migrants originate in Asia, and Europe was the birthplace of the second largest number of migrants, 25%, followed by Latin America, 15%. India has the largest diaspora in the world, 16 million people, followed by Mexico, 12 million, and Russia, 11 million. A 2012 survey by Gallup found that given the opportunity, 640 million adults would migrate to another country, with 23% of these would-be immigrant choosing the United States as their desired future residence, while 7% of respondents, representing 45 million people, would choose the United Kingdom. Canada, France, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Germany, Spain, Italy, and the United Arab Emirates made up the rest of the top 10 desired destination countries. In USA there were in 2023 1,197,254 immigration applications, initial receipts, 523,477 immigration cases completed, and 2,464,021 immigration cases pending according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Several countries have been accused of encouraging immigration to other countries in order to create divisions. The term economic migrant refers to someone who has traveled from one region to another region for the purposes of seeking employment and an improvement in quality of life and access to resources. An economic migrant is distinct from someone who is a refugee fleeing persecution. Many countries have immigration and visa restrictions that prohibit a person entering the country for the purposes of gaining work without a valid work visa. As a violation of a state's immigration laws, a person who is declared to be an economic migrant can be refused entry into a country. The World Bank estimates that remittances totaled $420 billion in 2009, of which $317 billion went to developing countries. Legislation regarding the protection of rights of immigrants and equal access to justice differs per nation. International law, the product of the United Nations and other multinational organizations, creates protocols governing immigrant rights. International law and the European Convention of Human Rights state that immigrants can only be detained for legitimate aims of the state. It also notes that vulnerable people should be protected from unreasonable punishment and lengthy detention. International law outlines requirements for due process and suitable conditions. However, nations are sovereign, and the protocols of international law cannot be enforced upon them. Nations have the freedom to handle immigrants as they choose, and to structure how any legal aid is distributed. Human rights organizations strongly criticize individual nation-states for the limitations of their immigration policies and practices. Treatment of migrants in host countries, both by governments, employers, and original population, is a topic of continual debate and criticism, and the violation of migrant human rights is an ongoing crisis. The United Nations Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families, has been ratified by 48 states, most of which are heavy exporters of cheap labor. Major migrant-receiving countries and regions including Western Europe, North America, Pacific Asia, Australia, and the Gulf states have not ratified the convention, even though they are host to the majority of international migrant workers. Although freedom of movement is often recognized as a civil right in many documents such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, 1966, the freedom only applies to movement within national borders and the ability to return to one's home state. Some proponents of immigration argue that the freedom of movement both within and between countries is a basic human right, and that the restrictive immigration policies, typical of nation-states, violate this human right of freedom of movement. Such arguments are common among ideologies like anarchism and libertarianism. As philosopher and open borders activist Jacob Appel has written, treating human beings differently, simply because they were born on the opposite side of a national boundary, is hard to justify under any mainstream philosophical, religious, or ethical theory. Where immigration is permitted, it is typically selective. As of 2003, family reunification accounted for approximately 2/3 of legal immigration to the U.S. every year. Ethnic selection, such as the White Australia policy, has generally disappeared, but priority is usually given to the educated, skilled, and wealthy. Less privileged individuals, including the mass of poor people in low-income countries, cannot avail themselves of the legal and protected immigration opportunities offered by wealthy states. This inequality has also been criticized as conflicting with the principle of equal opportunities. The fact that the door is closed for the unskilled, while at the same time many developed countries have a huge demand for unskilled labor, is a major factor in illegal immigration. The contradictory nature of this policy, which specifically disadvantages the unskilled immigrants while exploiting their labor, has also been criticized on ethical grounds. Immigration policies which selectively grant freedom of movement to targeted individuals are intended to produce a net economic gain for the host country. They can also mean net loss for a poor donor country through the loss of the educated minority, a brain drain. This can exacerbate the global inequality in standards of living that provided the motivation for the individual to migrate in the first place. One example of competition for skilled labor is active recruitment of health workers from developing countries by developed countries. There may, however, also be a brain gain to emigration, as migration opportunities lead to greater investments in education in developing countries. Overall, research suggests that migration is beneficial both to the receiving and sending countries. Thank you for watching this video.